For years, Donald Trump and his cultists boasted that he brought black unemployment down to historic lows. But on this, once again, President Biden has surpassed Donald Trump's best. Intrigued? Then click that like and subscribe, and enjoy the video. So as most of you who watch the channel know, one of the primary theses of this channel is to celebrate the fact that the Democratic Party in modern times has a much better economic record than the modern Republican Party, basically ever since the Cold War ended. Now, this runs contrary to popular sentiment. Like, you've probably heard this expression, I know I did countless times growing up in rural red states. You had people who were moderates or even progressives, but they would say things like, listen, I'm socially liberal, but I'm fiscally conservative. And it was kind of this lazy, sentiment, but the idea was it reflected this belief that the Republican Party, number one, is fiscally conservative, which they are absolutely not. They spend like drunken sailors, so to speak. And number two, the fiscal conservatism leads to economic prosperity in terms of national politics, and many economists conclude that that's not the case, that austerity politics doesn't do anybody any favors. But number three, there's a close association in the public sentiment that the Republican Party is better on economic issues. Like even now, if you poll people, and this is nothing new, but let's just take like modern polling, like contemporary recent polling. As unpopular as Donald Trump was, there are wide swaths of Americans who voted for President Biden in the 2020 election over Donald Trump, but even now say, well, we dislike Trump for X, Y, and Z, but we think that he was better on the economy. Economic confidence tends to favor Republicans in polling, even though the facts for the past 40 years absolutely do not support that, and as a matter of fact, point to the opposite. And there's an outspoken Democratic operative who used to work for President Clinton named Simon Rosenberg that I'm a big fan of. And this is something that he has constantly talked about again and again and again on Twitter and on his public appearances, that Democrats, their advocates in mainstream and social media, people on the left, from liberals to progressives, whatever, we need to reclaim the narrative that the Democratic Party and the left in general, we're just better on economic issues. The Democratic Party has an economic record that is superior to the Republican parties. And it's an uphill battle to reclaim it because perception is reality. It doesn't matter if the facts are on your side. The facts don't speak for themselves. So we have to get better about articulating those facts persuasively to the public. Now, having said all that, one of the things that you hear the most from Republicans in the modern era, particularly MAGA Republicans, is that under Donald Trump, black unemployment dropped to historic lows. And that is true. But that is something that even as Trump's mismanagement of the COVID pandemic ravaged the economy, including black unemployment, he would constantly say that, listen, at our best, we dropped black unemployment to historic lows. And I want to play a clip for you from the Fox Propaganda Network, Judge Jeanine Pirro in particular from The Five, where she tries to make this case. And then we're going to dive into the facts as they are.
Judge, the thing I like about
that I'm around the table.
Yeah, that was very helpful. But again, I kind of zoned out. It was a rough weekend. But there's a really positive thing in here I found about the Hispanics and women and blacks taking a major hit. Could that be a sign that maybe identity politics has also kind of worn its way out?
Great point.
Thank you.
You know what?
Great point. The idea that the right and Republican Party don't play identity politics is so stupid. It's absolutely not the case. Conservatives play identity politics as much as anybody, be it racial issues, be it issues of religious identity, religious association, sexual orientation. They're as likely as anybody to play identity politics. But let's continue.
But he can pander as much as he wants to, but he's not going to bring people along with him. What brings the public along with a candidate is when you have more jobs like blacks did under the Trump administration than ever in history.
So that's the particular clip I wanted to play right there. That sentiment by Judge Jeanine Pirro is a common right-wing talking point. And unfortunately for the Trump administration, well, they're no longer the Trump administration, but the Trump campaign and conservatives and Republicans, it's no longer the case. Back in March, black unemployment rate dropped to a record low of 5%, lower than it ever was under the Trump administration. And this, of course, is now under the Biden administration. So as this, and we're going to look at this chart here, but so under the Trump administration, black unemployment dropped to a historic low of 5.3%. Pretty damn good. But three things. Number one, it is now lower under the Biden administration. So if we're going to give Trump credit for what was previously an historic low of of black unemployment, Biden gets even more credit because his best beats Trump's best, number one. Number two, black unemployment skyrocketed to unprecedented levels during, well, I shouldn't say unprecedented levels because there was a time when black people weren't allowed to have jobs. But during the pandemic, during Trump's mismanagement of the COVID pandemic, black unemployment got to nearly 17%. So it dropped to 5.3% under Trump and then skyrocketed, thanks in large part to his mismanagement of the pandemic, to nearly 17%. Just 3 years ago, black unemployment rate had spiked to reach a pandemic high of 16.8% compared to the record White House unemployment rate, or record white unemployment rate of 14%. So that's another thing, too. Yes, Trump had previously oversaw an historic low that Biden has now succeeded. But he also presided over an incredible high thanks to his mismanagement of the COVID pandemic. But this chart is really what I want to show you here. Because the fact of the matter is, and we've talked about this before, Republicans in the modern era are handed pretty good economies by their, Democratic predecessors and then tank them. So you look at, this is a chart tracking black unemployment. So you look that it was high, thanks to the tail end of the George H.W. Bush administration, a Republican. And then it slowly decreased. Black unemployment decreased under the wise economic stewardship of the Clinton administration. This is Bill Clinton here. High, thanks to a Republican, drops under a Democrat. Then what happens? Well, a Republican takes over again. It starts to climb up again. But then it drops again. Then we hit the Great Recession, which happened at the tail end of the second Bush administration. And now you see it climbing. And he hands this economy off to President Obama. So once again, 10 out of the last 11 recessions happened under Republican administrations that they then hand off to Democrats. So this is what Barack Obama inherited. And look, if you look at over the past the 2 terms of Barack Obama's administration, black unemployment dropped once again until it hit a record low of 5.3% under Trump. This is a continuation, a clear continuation of Obama-era trends. This is, once again, we talked about this. This is the equivalent of a Democratic president taking a 2-story pit in the ground left for him by his Republican predecessor and building 98 beautiful stories of a skyscraper. And then he leaves office. And then a Republican comes along and builds the last 2 stories, takes it from 98 to 100, and then says, I built the whole damn thing. I built the tallest skyscraper. Obviously, 100 stories isn't the tallest skyscraper, but you understand what I mean for the metaphor. When in reality, they contributed considerably less to the height of that skyscraper than the person before it, in this case, in this metaphor, a Democratic president. And then, of course, what happens is after they add those first 2 stories, the Republican president, or they add the final 2 stories, then they demolish the whole building and bring it right back down to that 3-story hole in the ground and then hand it off to another Democrat. That's what happened for the economies in general for the past 40 years, but also with black unemployment. Trump's best was a continuation of Obama-era economic trends, as you can clearly see. And then the moron presided over a complete skyrocketing of black unemployment to nearly 17%. That happened on his watch, in large part because he mismanaged the COVID pandemic. And now, in 2.5 years, President Biden, after inheriting this mess, President Biden got it back down to lower than Donald Trump ever did. So what is my point? My point is, it is a fact. It's not a matter of opinion. It is a fact that the economy does better when Democrats are in the White House than when Republicans are. Now, I'm not sitting here and saying that every single economic development is, the result of a particular party. But Republicans have set this narrative. Hey, when we're in charge, the economy is better. It's simply not true. When Democrats are in charge, the economy is better. And this one boast of Donald Trump about black unemployment, one of the last few feathers in his cap, so to speak, now we can take that out of his cap because Joe Biden has done it better.